Okay, so I'm going to start out by giving an overview of who we are as FarmQA as a whole, and then we're going to spend a majority of the time talking about the product and doing a live product demo. First of all, my name is Ben Munson. I'm a senior technology specialist here at FarmQA, and today the series that we're presenting is using technology to yield service growth. But boiled down, what that means is we're really just going to give an overview of the product and FarmQA as a whole. So who is FarmQA? So we build digital tools for agronomists, and what that does, that helps provide greater service value to the agronomist, whether that's in a retail setting, independent consultants, or agronomists within an individual farming operation. So we are focused on building digital tools to facilitate that relationship, meaning on our side, that's a scouting app, recommendation writing tools, map layer functionality. And what we've done is we started out with the scouting tools, and we focused on that being very flexible, user-friendly is one of our biggest assets as a software company. A little bit of background about us is we are built on the Microsoft Azure cloud. We do have 10 engineers on staff working with us, a lot of them being former Microsoft employees. We were founded in 2015. We were started in Fargo, North Dakota by our founders, Howard and Brian Dahl, who also own Agronomy Technology and have a long lineage in the ag space here in North Dakota. With that said, so we'll continue on here, talk a little bit about our product. So I was mentioning before what our product looks like today and where we're going in the future. We started out with the crop scouting tool, and so we have that. Our really strengths in that are the customizability of that platform, in the sense that users can build out the forms that they want to collect data in, and then it's flexible in how that pushes data out in a format that the consultant wants, the retailer wants, etc. We branched out, we added recommendation writing tools. What that means today is recommendations mean to us chemical recs, fertility recommendations. Now, as of this year, we've added in the data layer component. What that is it's bringing in spatial data sets, whether it's zone maps, yield maps, imagery, into the platform. In future years, if we look into 2022, that's really where we want to deepen our integrations. And really, that's pretty open-ended as far as who we plan to work with. In 2023 is where we want to start to do more analytics, do a deeper dive into the entire data set that we have within FarmQA to provide more output automatic analytics on that data set. As far as our footprint, we are a global company. A lot of our customers are represented in North America. So right now, we're currently being used across 4 million acres globally. You can see our representation on this map here, along with some of our other geos that we are working with and in. As far as our focus, we do have a large concentration within the Midwest. In addition to that, we do have a lot of representation on the West Coast, Pacific Northwest, and with that, we do touch a lot of different crops. So you can see our crop list that we're working with, and this is constantly growing. The value of our platform, as I previously mentioned, is customizability, and that's allowing us to work with a lot of these niche markets, along with supporting the row crop customers quite well. So with that, I think the product will speak for itself, so I want to keep most of the time set aside for that. So with that said, I am going to jump over to our web platform here and walk you through the product itself. So again, if you have questions, issues, post them in the chat as we go. If you do have questions about the product, we're going to set some time aside at the end to address any questions. And for now, I'm going to be giving just a high-level overview of the product. What you're looking at now is our web portal. So we call this FarmQA Controller. We start out by either importing a bulk import of field boundaries, or a user can delineate the boundaries within our platform itself. We accept shapefiles, KMLs in the import process. Once those boundaries are in, we will delineate them, but in addition, we can color code that by crop, which is shown here in the legend view. where you get a breakdown of the number of fields and acres per crop. A few things to point out on this map view is that we can search the map by crop type. So at this point, I'm just showing my corn fields. The other thing that we can do is we have different color options for this map. So if we look into the map details pane, currently I'm coloring by crop, but we also have the opportunity to color by variety. And then again, we can still search on corn, at which point we're showing where all the different corn varieties are planted across an operation. The last coloration option we have here is to color by your organizational units. So what that means in our case is that we can build and bring in a grower farm field tree based on a user's preference, and then the tree can be used to color the map. This provides, in a lot of cases, a visualization of where different growers are growing their produce geographically, and then in the legend we break it down by the number of their fields and acres. With this view at the top right, we can also break this down if we just want to see my Minnesota farm operation versus my North Dakota operation. You can see how that's filtering down the map in real time. That filter persists throughout the entire product. So if we want to view scouting reports, recommendations by an individual grower, we can use this filter at any time. The other global filter we do have is by growing season. So one of the most common use cases here is simply viewing cropping history. If you want to see what we grew in my North Dakota farm in 2019, we toggle back to that year. The map and legend automatically update to show that. What I'm showing on the left-hand side is our basic map pane. So if you want to toggle between different satellite providers in the background, you can do that. We also have an overlay, and that would include a township section overlay, which we can show here and also bring up on that mobile application so that user can see their location relative to the township section lines. We also have an integration to WDT, and that provides us with real-time weather radar data in 5-minute increments, and that will be projected on top of your field boundaries. Unfortunately, there's nothing coming through at this time, so there's not much to showcase there, but that would project and play on top of your boundaries, as I said. We also get field-specific weather data with that same integration. Working our way through the map pane, we can also turn on different layers within the map view. So what that means to us is, first of all, we can delineate where we have field entrances. So if we view our fields, this is the global way to see where each of our entrances is per field. The value of this is that then from a web view or the mobile application, new employees, truck drivers, delivery drivers can do route to, which provides them turn-by-turn directions to their fields on the mobile application. Additionally, we are working with compaction data, which is an in-house electrically driven penetrometer. That data flows into FarmQA along with some soil samples. We are going to focus on that on a later webinar. Today we're going to focus in on the main scouting functionality, which from the map view, I have turned that on as a layer. And what that provides us from this view, if I go back out and view all my fields, is a representation of where we have submitted reports through the selected time period, as you see here in the bottom right. So in this case, these are all my scouting reports in the last 30 days. One of the most common use cases with this view is to then break down by crop, and you can visually see perhaps which fields you've missed or haven't checked within the time period you have selected. From this view, we can zoom in to see within a field where we've done field checks. We can click on our icons to get a summary view of those reports. From this screen, we can export, but we can also click on the header if we want to get into a full page view of any given scouting report. We'll touch on a little bit more of the details on what those scouting reports look like here in a little bit, but there's a view on the mobile app and within controller in a table view if we want to get to that particular view. Back to the map tab, the last thing to touch on here would be our field level details. So what I'm going to do in this case is I've clicked on this field 32, And 32 in my case is just a field name. On the top left, we see the details as far as who owns this, the field name, as I said, the crop, and the variety planted in this given season. We do see the field size listed out. We have the opportunity to manage this field boundary. So again, if we import the boundaries, we can keep the shapes the same. If you do draw them, perhaps on our mobile phone or web view, we can fine tune the boundaries if you simply want to add more detail. But the other thing to keep in mind is we can also store different field boundaries season over season. So perhaps in 2022, this field is going to be split in half. We could edit the boundary to show just that half field and save that as a version of the field within 2022. A few other things to point out here is we can drag and drop in an updated shape if we have a KML or shape file for a new season. And we can also key in the exact acreage if you've drawn a field and want the exact acreage boundary in there. Keep in mind that when we do our recommendation product totals, we are going to be using this exact acreage value to produce those totals. And that's why you'd want that to be an accurate value. In addition here, what you're seeing is that we have the ability to put in plant harvest dates, which at this point is a simple date picker, which you can also do on the mobile app. We have attachments, so FarmQA can be used as a grower portal, and if you simply want to share data, variable rate prescriptions, that sort of thing, you can use FarmQA as a data repository, storing data field by field within the selected growing season. This allows growers to then click and download a file if they'd like. In addition, we have an event log. So in this case, I've used this field for demos a lot, so you'll see a lot of activities in here, but this is capturing any event currently captured within FarmQA, which is broken down into harvest events, plant dates, scouting reports, and recommendations. From this view, we can break down the event types or categories and just, for example, see our spray records. We can see date by date when we sprayed fields. We can click in on any one of these tabs to view the full details of that recommendation. Or we have an export all option, which in this case would generate a spray record on this field for the entire season. Additionally, from this view, you'll see a few additional things that we can display on the field itself. One of those being layers. What layers are, and I'll jump over to a demo account where I have some better data set. Layers is a way for us to bring in any spatial data set that's important to the customer. And the way this works, in this case, I'm showing a zone map, and I can toggle between a yield map for this field within the season. What I've done is you can set up categories for layers within FarmQA. So these are simply buckets to house data within the field, and they can be set up as time-based layers, seasonal layers, or permanent layers. Once those are categorized and created, then a user can simply drag and drop a file. That can be a shape file, a KML/KMZ, or you can have GeoTIFF files uploaded. You can drag and drop those in. They will automatically populate on the map and be saved within your FarmQA account and be accessible on the mobile app as well. One thing to note, if there's consultants out there using ADMS, we do support their GKT styling formats. So if you upload a file, a shape file that contains that styling, it will automatically look the same as it did with an ADMS using the style. I talked about that being visible on mobile, and this is kind of a sneak peek into the mobile app, but we can also toggle on those layers within the mobile app, and this is where the real value comes in, as your location will be projected on top of these layers, allowing you to scout zones, go to certain sampling points, etc. Jumping back in, that was the layer section. We also do have our integration to WDT, which will provide us with current conditions forecasted, and we can also get automatic precip totals and growing degree information as well. Continuing on, I will touch on, we do have a list view. If users want to group this by crop or variety, this will provide them with a different view of seeing their entire operation, where you can see this group by crop. The columns in here represent variety, things like your planted dates, days after planting. From this view, you can sort and filter any columns. If you want to say, what order do we check these fields, or when was the last time we checked field 106, for example. We could see that that was July 12th, and you could circle back to that field. You can also take actions from this view if you want to multi-select. We can export out data to Excel, like you can see on the top left, or we can do things like assign crops, put in plant dates, harvest dates, etc. Okay, so far this is kind of touched on the basics of the map view, the list view here, the layers. But at this point, I'm going to circle in and go to the mobile application. And what this is going to do is think of the mobile side as this is where the agronomist is collecting the data in field, boots on the ground. The mobile app runs on iOS and Android, tablets, whatever a user wants to use. We would support that in the mobile application side or in the field. You note that we'll start you out on a similar map-based view to start with. The green dot is unique to the app, where you can see your location projected onto the map itself. From this view, we still have access to the organizational tree, where a user can filter down to view Minnesota farms versus my ND farms, for example. If we zoom in, we get to a point where we can see the field names projected. In my case, I've used a numeric naming system for my fields. We can also view these map layer options, which we can toggle on and off, and as I said before, project township section lines on the mobile app. Now from this view, we can do a few things. We can click into a field to start scouting, or if you have walked up to a field that's not yet created, we can create new fields on the mobile app, and that's going to allow us to delineate a boundary and save that and then immediately start scouting it. So for example, on my screen here, I can click the corners, or I can freehand around a field to actually create the boundary. And then when I add the field, I can put in details as far as the name, crop, when it was planted, and what grower it associates back to. In my case, I won't actually create this field, but that is a function from the map. The other thing you can do as far as creating reports is you can come over to the list view, and this comes down to user preference if you want to start your reports from the map view or the list view. If it is from the list, one unique thing that you can do here is search by crop. This will then break the list down to view just my cornfields in my particular case by my Minnesota farm unit. And then within the column here, we will sort this by distance. So the fields that are closest to you will show up by default at the top of the list. I'm going to click into a field. This is where we see the field specific details at the bottom, like what's planted, field size. All of your previous reports are accessible by clicking on this 21 icon. We have 21 reports in this field, which we can scroll through, and we can click on, for example, last week's report if you want a reference of what you saw last time you were there. I'll also point out that we have a field entrance here on the left-hand side. We can delineate that, so let's say that that entrance was not already delineated. We can click on our map to drop that pin essentially of where the entrance is. And then just like on the web view, we get the Route to option, which is going to pull up whatever your default map provider is for navigation on your phone. It's going to know your location, and then that's what's going to give you the turn-by-turn directions, not only to the field, but to the entrance itself. Okay, continuing on here, clicking on the ... options is where I went to delineate the entrance, but we can also put in our plant harvest dates directly from this mobile phone. But if we want to scout, the workflow is you can turn on a layer like I showed before, perhaps a zone map. Your green circle is going to be projected on this field as you walk around. Then you can click the blue plus button. That's going to drop a pin where you're standing. If you see, for example, a disease-specific issue, that's going to be your recommended workflow as it uses your device's GPS to drop a pin. Additionally, we can click on the boundary, which will drop a pin as well. We can set up default templates or choose from your list of full templates. What templates mean in this case is you'd have a template set up per crop. In my case, you're viewing a corn template. This can be customized, which I'll show here in a minute, but what that means is you can set up your own insect list, your own disease list, and even choose what data type you want to use as far as numeric entry, text entry, etc. In my template, I have a summary text that starts out on the template, which I'm going to say overall, the field looks good. I'm going to jump between my tabs. So right now I'm going to do a yield estimate at this spot, given it's a late season corn template. We can add the number of ears of corn we want to assess. So in this case, I've got, let's say, maybe 3 ears of corn that I've taken in a 17.5-foot row. I can count the width per ear. Same thing goes for length. Then within FarmQA, we're going to automatically calculate the averages based on your plant populations, your kernel counts, or your kernel per bushel output. But as you can see here, we're going to automatically calculate your yield estimate. Jumping into insects, this is where I can showcase the different data input types. So if you like the numeric key-in, you can do that. An alternative would be the sliders. You can set min and max ranges to this. In my case, it's running 0 through 100%. The other alternative would be a pick list style. And you can use any combination of these, but with the pick list style, you could set up, in your case, you could delineate non-low, medium, high, or add in more or fewer pick list options. With every question, you can do a couple additional things. We can take pictures. So in my case, I'm going to take a real-time photo. There's no limit to the number of photos that you can take within the mobile application. You can also attach it from your phone in real time. The other thing we can do is further delineate within our map view where you're seeing any given issue. So this includes things like a freehand draw tool, dropping pins. We have a circle tool along with a line tool if you want to perhaps show a route that you walked in the field. These will be shown as thumbnails within every question that you fill them out for. If I continue on in my template, I'll show you the disease tab simply to show what back-to-back pick list styles look like. So it's pretty easy to move through here and be efficient with your data collection. In addition, I'll jump over to plant conditions to show our last data type, which is a date picker. So this allows you to define a date-specific information. And then what I'll do in my particular example is I'll back out now that we're done filling out the data for this particular point. But what I want to show you is that we can also do multiple assessments in a field. What that means is I've now gone to a second spot. This is the northeast corner of the field. And now I'm going to do a second yield estimate. And in this case, I just have one corn ear I'm going to assess. And perhaps I saw aphids here as well, but in a lower threshold. So I can delineate that, and I'll do the same just for the sake of the report. I'm going to do a third aphid assessment. At this point, we're done with the scouting side, but in the mobile application, we can also write a chemical recommendation that's going to accompany the scouting report. So I've done this by bringing up our action pane, and I'm going to write a recommendation in this case. By default, we know what field you're in, so we're going to bring that up and select that field 231. But when talking about chemical recommendations, we allow for that agronomist to be efficient in saying perhaps 3 of these cornfields are all going to get the same chemical mix. So I can search and multi-select from this view. And now we're writing a recommendation that's pertaining to all 3 of those cornfields. One unique thing that I'd point out here is we do have the opportunity to write field-specific notes along with these recommendations, or to do spot spraying. So what I'm going to do in this field 231 is I'm going to say, instead of spraying this entire field of 157 acres, we are just going to spray, let's say, 25 acres. And it's going to be just the headlands. And we can continue on to say, notes for any particular field in here if we want. Now, the next phase is to select what chemicals we're going to suggest to spray. There's 2 ways to do that. The most common way is to use mixes. Mixes are going to be predefined mixes that the agronomist sets up ahead of time, perhaps in the off season. They can give nicknames to these mixes. In my case, you can see corn disease mix, post-emerge, etc. And you can see chemical combinations are shown within here with default rates and mix orders displayed. So what I'll do now is I'm going to select, and you saw how I poked through to preview, if you will, the mixes. But now I'm going to bring in the mix that I have found. The mix order is shown here, but what you can do is you can actually click in to any given product. And even though this is a predefined mix, you can adjust the rates. You can put in notes specific to this product if need be, maybe batch numbers. We can also see at the bottom some details. We see the EPA numbers displayed. We have the opportunity to pull up the actual label. In my case, this is the EPA label for Abound, and you can see all the details pulled up within that mobile application itself. Additionally, here at the bottom, you see what crops this can be sprayed on, pre-harvest intervals, rainfast, REI, etc. The second way that we can add products, and again, this is the mixes is primary. The second way, though, is through an individual product lookup. This is going to be a database that's specific to your operation that you can set up in Controller. But from this view, we can search for Abound or a product name. You can search on active ingredients. If I search chlorethanol, you can see all the products that contain that. One thing to point out is that we also have these group numbers tracked for all the active ingredients. So if you're looking at, let's say, resistance issues, we'll circle back at the end and show you how you can look at all the group numbers used across a season, across multiple seasons, or even across crops. Regardless, if we want to add in a product from this individual lookup, we can select that. It adds it to the bottom of the list, but we can readjust by sliding this up and down to adjust the mix order. And then in addition, if I continue to scroll down here, you can notice how we're inputting a water volume. We track automatically the pre-harvest interval, rainfast, REI information for that entire mix. We have instructions here. This can be something that goes to the applicator. You can send it to the grower or note for yourself. So you could say spray now, and you can set optional priority levels with this recommendation for things like high, medium, low picker, along with a date selection of when something should get applied. At this point, I'm going to submit that recommendation along with submitting the scouting report. At this point, we're going to walk through how you can then view that data. So everything we've done so far has been within the Fields tab on the bottom left of the mobile application. But now we're going to jump over to the scouting section. And this is where we can see two things. One is our in-progress scouting reports. Those are like the drafts in your email. They're specific to your phone, and nobody else can see them until they get submitted. You can submit these in bulk if you multi-select and click submit or delete. Then the next section is past reports. These have been sent. Anybody else within FarmQA that has access to this organization can see these reports. Again, that's where the grower portal concept comes in. In my case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this report that I just generated as part of our demo. What's just slid up from the bottom is a PDF customization pane where you can choose if you want to include those recommendations, for example. You can adjust your header options if that's to be included. If you're actually on a mobile phone, you get two options at the bottom. One would be share and the other would be open PDF. The share option actually pulls up the window of your phone, and it's going to have the default share options like texting, emailing, group messaging, WhatsApp, etc., where you can send those reports out immediately from your phone. In my case, I'm just going to open the PDF to showcase what this looks like. But in a practical scenario, you can also open the PDF and then share that PDF with whatever native options you have on your phone. So in my case, you see my logo, my farm-field information is in here. We can see what was planted, when it was planted, what date we were checking the field. The field is going to be shown here. We can choose to have weather data in this report as well, which will automatically stamp on the date and time that you scouted. You see the overall summary at the top where I said the field looks good, followed by that detailed table of what we saw in the field. Each column here is corresponding back to a pin, so you can easily see where, for example, we saw the 71 aphid count versus the 58 with the 1 and 3 pins. Additionally, if we're doing multiple assessments, meaning that we have multiple pins, we will automatically include this average column. where we can then see the yield counts averaged across our assessment points. The other thing that if we scroll down, we can see that recommendation associated to this field. And again, remember I did the partial recommendation of 25 fields across the 157. But then the product totals are in here, listed out by rates, but then multiplied out by the field size, in this case 25 acres, to get our automatic product totals. If we scroll on the bottom, this is where we see the pictures, the notations that associate back with the questions, in this case the aphid question. That is a complete detailed view, is what I would call that can be sent to a grower. There are alternative views. So first of all, you could remove the recommendation from that view and just send a scouting report. The more common thing to do would actually be to select multiple reports. So again, keep in mind that from this view, we could break down that past report section by just one particular grower. And then we could multi-select reports and send that into a single PDF. However, what I wanted to show you now would be a different view, which is, in this case, it's going to strip out the scouting report, and this is going to be just the recommendation view. I like to think of this as the to-do list that can be sent out to an applicator, to a grower, based on what an agronomist saw in the field. So again, I'm going to open PDF, but this could be texted out as well. And in this view, we're getting, again, your logo up here, but then we get a section representing a field. So if you recall in my demo, I had selected 3 different corn fields, each of the 3 listed out here with their own product totals shown in this column, again, based on the field size. And as we scroll down through here, we notice at the bottom, there's a shopping cart, if you will, which would be the product totals across all 3 of those corn fields. So this is a view that can be sent out as well. The last view that I wanted to showcase would be, again, if you multi-select from this view and say, okay, all 3 of these chemical recommendations need to go out to Munson Farms. I'm going to select 3, and I'm going to send all of those to PDF. What you can do is, again, you can customize a little bit of what this is going to look like. I'm going to choose to hide my per field details, which is going to condense that report. And that'll make sense in a minute what that actually means. But in the PDF, this is going to be a view where you're going to get product totals across all 3 of these recommendations that I have here, along with the totals per individual unique mix that we have written. So again, this is something that viewed as a PDF or texted out as a WhatsApp message, text message, etc. So collapsing the field details, what that does is it just shows the details of that mix one time at the bottom, with these totals being the totals across all 3 of these fields. But again, the value of that report is then looking across this. If you have different mixes, that grower can easily see, okay, these 5 fields need this particular mix, whereas these 3 fields need this unique mix. So that is the view for different mixes rolled up into one. And this is going to be a product total, or again, a shopping list across those 3 different mix types, where you can see the total gallons needed. We have different units, so if you're watching in from Canada, if you want Canadian specific units, metric units, we support that as well. That is all in the product, along with unique products or chemicals per region. Going back to the mobile application, on the recommendations, you can choose to complete these, and this is where we strive in helping that agronomist-grower relationship, or communication, I should say, where, let's say an agronomist writes this recommendation, but a grower can actually come in here and mark when he sprayed. And if I mark this as completed, we'll now show that this is in progress, versus scrolling down, you'd see some recommendations with a green check mark showing that they've been completely done. What that does is a couple things. First of all, it tells the agronomist what's been sprayed, but we're also tracking the temp, wind speed, and wind direction at the time of application, which automatically gets stamped in, and I will show that in controller. The last thing before we move away from the mobile application is we can go into offline mode. So if you are scouting in an area with poor connectivity, you can go into full offline mode. The app still functions the same, with the exception of 2 things. One is we don't have the satellite background map, but you still see your boundaries, you still see your location. You can still use the list view, is going to function just the same. Then when you scout, the template is going to view just like it did before, and you can come in here and fill out your field information, and then you can only scout when you're online. So once you do come back online, this is where you can jump into that past report section under scouting, and it's going to allow you to then bulk submit with that connection. That's what you see here, past reports, or in progress, I should say. And then we're going to select all and submit, and those will then get pushed up in a bulk process. Okay, jumping back into controller to show what those reports look like. In my previous web demos, I showed the map, the field tab, but in this case, we're going to jump into the scouting tab. This provides us with a list view of all the submitted scouting reports that we've done. Again, keep in mind that we can break this down to perhaps just show the Minnesota farm fields, and then we can search this by a particular field name and see all of the scouting reports that I've submitted for that farm within the selected time period over here. What this allows us to do is if I click into the report, I can view the details of that report within this view. And so in this case, we see, again, that summary text up top, each of the columns representing the pins. One thing we can do in this view is, first of all, you can interact with the map, zoom in and out, click on your different locations, see the details over here. But then you can view the notations. So as far as where we saw the aphids, the pictures, we can jump into the different reports. One thing that I should point out is we have a full edit section. So if you wanted to clean up your notes, we need to spray. We can add those notes in, and you can see that edit mode is going to take those edits, and you can clean up the report that way. The other thing you can do is if you have a workflow of on the mobile side you scout, but then back on the web view you want to write recommendations, this button up here allows you to write a recommendation on top of that scouting report. So in this case, once I write this rec from the web view, it's going to be associated to this scouting report, but you can do it sitting at a computer opposed to in the field on a mobile phone. We can toggle up and down, so this is like turning pages in a binder if you have those search. The search in my case is set to this field 231, and as I thumb up and down, I'm seeing all the reports for 231 back to back, so you can easily look at that data set. From this view, it's a little sneak peek at the metrics view, but you can see trends over time. So if you've been looking at spider mites, in my case, you can see the trends week by week of what you've seen, and that projects on top of here. I also want to point out that we can link over to the recommendations here. So if I click on that rec, it's going to show you the chemical recommendation for that field 231 that we just did. And it's going to pull up the details, but we can also view it in a list view, which I'll show here in a second as well. So this is that same recommendation where you had all three fields, and we had the same mix applied to all three fields with the product totals listed down here. But what I want to point out is this field 125 was the one that I marked as completed. So we can see that completion date and time, but also that stamp in of the temperature, wind speed, wind direction is automatically included in the recommendation view. If we want, we can drill into individual product details over here. What I was saying before was the list view. So what I'm showing in this case is all my recommendations for the last 30 days for Minnesota farms. And so from this view, like similar to the mobile application, you can multi-select and send that out as a single PDF. And as you can see here, we can customize that PDF from our web view as well. Or you can actually export this to Excel if you want to do some of your own data manipulation. The same thing can be said for the scouting side. So if you want to export scouting reports to Excel, that functionality is available. From this rec view now, if we click in, this gets to the view that we were just seeing. And again, you can thumb up and down between those recommendations. We can also mark the recommendations as completed from the web view. And that's going to stamp in the date and pull in the weather data when it's available. What I should touch on here is on the recommendation side, what you can see from this table view is, again, those group numbers, which I talked about on the mobile app. But again, where that real value comes in is I'm going to set a custom time range, and we're going to go back 4 years and show all my recommendations for the last 4 years. And I'm going to view it for just field 231. So now you can see we've written a lot of recommendations for this field. You can see we've used a lot of group 2s, a lot of group 5s, regardless if it was corn planted or soybeans planted, etc. So you can have that conversation about resistance issues across your sprays, across seasons. Now, the question may come up as far as how that product database is defined, so we'll get into some of those details here. So as a user, you can set up your product database. We will provide you with some basic products, but what this shows you here is that if I click on Acheron, for example, we have the details in the center showing the manufacturer, EPA numbers, the labels are all here. You can view them from this screen. You can see the active ingredients with their group numbers, etc. If we wanted to add a new product, we can import directly from the EPA. So if we search for something like Endura, you'll see the product labels come up. We can look at the EPA number. In this case, there's an organ-specific one, and the tablets is not what I'm interested in, so I'm going to find Endura fungicide, add that to my list, and that's going to pull in the details that you see here specific to Endura, including those active ingredients. So that's how you can build up your own database. We can also import from Excel if you have that in existence already. Now, after those products are defined, you can come over to the Mix tab, and this is where you can see all those mixes that I've predefined and given a nickname, in this case, corn post-emergence. You can see the details here, but what we can also do is we can define a new mix, and so that's pretty easy to say. Corn, let's say you just post-emerge, number 2. Say this is going to be putting down 12 gallons per acre. We could say that this is going to target broadleafs, and we're going to say this can be sprayed on corn. Now, to create this mix, this is where you can search this by any of these attributes, things like what the target is. You can type in broadleafs, you can type in an active ingredient name, type in a crop name, but then you can multi-select crops here, chemicals here, and it's going to pull it into that mix. You can adjust the mix order, adjust the rates. Then we can save this, and you can see that that is now an available mix within a mobile application, within a rec writing view, to be used in future recommendations. So that really streamlines the process. The next thing I want to touch on would be the custom scouting templates. So if we circle back to the scouting tab where we saw this table view, there's a section up here where we can actually get into an edit view, where if I click on this corn template, you can see the different sections that I walked through in the demonstration. But what I'm going to show you now is how we can actually duplicate this template. We'll call this corn webinar. And at this point in time, we can take any one of these sections, and for example, if we don't care about having this bottom summary, we can actually delete entire sections. We can add new sections called something like soil moisture. And within this, we can add questions like soil crusting, maybe some pick list options, yes, no. We could add in a numeric value for maybe looking at the field capacity. So you'd say percent field capacity, etc. Now it's a new section which you could reorder, bring that to the front. You could do things like maybe clean up your insect list that might be relevant, might not be relevant, and then you could create new question types here, and again define your pick list options. So this is just to showcase how flexible these templates are. We do call them scouting templates, but you can see how this could be used for soil sampling, for collecting any sort of, maybe you're a grower and you want to do better record keeping. You could set up columns in here for your tillage passes, for your spraying events, for your harvesting. And the value is then that mobile app, which is easy to use, allows you to collect the data, then you can export out to Excel, that sort of thing, to see the data as an output. As soon as you save this template, any users of the software are going to get those changes that were made to the template or within the template. And at that point, they can start to scout the new information. So that's the template view. In this case, I'm going to discard that the view. The other thing that we should touch on is if you click into settings, there's a few things that you can set up as a user. First of all, I'm going to jump over to crops and varieties. So this is a tab where you can see My variety is listed out by crop. The plus button on the bottom right allows us to delineate new crops. So if you want to say, you know, you're going to add a new crop, you can choose from our kind of predefined crops, select what template, this is the scouting template you want to use as the default. Once that's done, you can also come in here and add varieties underneath that crop. So you could say you got a Pioneer variety, and you can give it a unique color, etc. That can be set up. You can create unique growing seasons within this view. We do have sensor integrations, which we haven't touched on yet. What that allows us to do is we can integrate in with both weather stations and soil moisture probes. I should be showing this from the map view, but it allows us to show the sensor integrated data in real time, and you could toggle that on from this view. The weather stations we're integrated with are Davis weather stations and Pessl. On the moisture probe side, we're currently integrated with Aquaspy. We are open to integration, so if we're waiting to be approached by customers interested in using different sensors, and we're open to bringing that data in. Additionally, from this settings view, you can see a couple different dashboards. We do have a usage dashboard to see when you've been submitting scouting reports, things like your total reports, observation information, etc., which fields you've checked the most, what scouts have checked the most. We also do have an advice export as well to see across the entire operation which products were recommended the most, product totals, that sort of thing. So you can automatically get these roll-ups within settings. The organizational tree that we talked about, so in my case, I've got a structure set up to match my operation, but at any given time, you can add new units or branches, if you will, underneath this. So you could say, maybe you've got a new grower that you're working with, named Ben, and you can add them as a branch underneath your North Dakota farm operation. Once that's done, we have the ability to add in a user to that. So this is where the grower piece could come in potentially, but once you add a grower, this is saying you can give a role to this user and they can see any data within that newly created branch. So an agronomist is essentially an admin within our system. They can do full functions. The crop scout, that's going to be an individual who's just going to be submitting scouting reports. They can't write the recommendations. Then talking about the grower view, if this is something where it's a grower underneath a consultant, underneath a retailer or co-op, they can actually be set up with a free view-only account where they can see the data, again, filtered down or specific to their operation, or they can get a paid account where they can do some of their own data entry, things like plant dates, bring in their own maps, etc. Regardless, the view here is that we have the granularity to break down access by branch and by role within the system. A few last things as we wrap up here is we do have an analytics view, which is currently in a beta view, but I do want to showcase that, and we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive on this view here in future weeks. But this is going to allow us to get more of a holistic view of what's going on across an entire operation. So when I click on the analytics tab here, this is going to pull us into a view where we can see a couple things. So this is going to be in this case, a list view. And if I filter this by crop, for example, or group it by crop, this is where you can see all my corn fields. In this case, each row represents an individual field, and the columns represent the data coming out of those forms. So like I said, it's more of a holistic view of saying across all my corn fields, I can sort this by aphids and see which fields have the highest aphid pressure. And then I can actually click in to see the trends over time at that field. You can customize this view, bringing in and out columns. You can export it to Excel. The other view that we provide within our analytics, and perhaps this is maybe even more interesting, is a map-based view, where in this case I have a heat map, or sorry, a field averages map displayed for my aphid pressure. So you could view this for things like aphid pressure, or this could be yield, this could be tar spot, this could be stock rot, things like that, or field level profitability displayed in dollars. What this allows you to do is you can zoom in, you can click on a field and see the value per field. So green, I had 35% aphid damage, whereas the red, I had 81. So you can see that view but we can also drill in and view a heat map view if you want to be more field specific on where you had issues within that field. So there's a lot coming here on more of that roll-up of data, but this is really where we're going on that kind of the lowest part of that pyramid that I showed earlier on the analytics of rolling up data. Again, this is more of a teaser for some of our future webinars where we're going to dive in on all of the map layers. We're going to dive in on analytics. There's a few others that we're going to touch on, which I'll show here in a minute. That is essentially FarmQA in a nutshell. We can dive in more if people have questions, but that is what I'd like to do now, is to open it up to questions. And again, we can post those in the chat of this Teams session, and I'll be able to address any specific questions that you have. Otherwise, you can always email us at support@farmqa.com or info@farmqa.com. So go ahead and start posting your comments in the chat box, and I will address those. In the meantime, I did want to just preface some of the upcoming demos that we have, the webinars. So if we look here, next week, we're going to be touching on a closer look on just the scouting side. These will be half-hour sessions. The recommendation piece, we'll do a deeper dive. Then we're going to touch on map layers, analytics, and then a few other kind of catch-all things on the 9th. So we'd love it if you guys could tune in with us weekly here as we go through the product in more depth. So with that said, I will take a look at the chat here. All right, well, it looks like people might not have access to the chat. So I will see if someone on our side can look into that. Otherwise, we will probably adjourn here if nobody has questions, and we will take questions via email if anything comes up from this webinar. We really appreciate you checking in with us, seeing what FarmQA is all about. We would love to hear from you. Again, a couple things that we can do as far as if you're interested in the product. We do have a free trial, so if anybody wants to do that, you can find it from our mobile application or our website. And this is where you can click the sign up free option in the top right. That's a 2-week trial. The other thing that we have access to is if you have field boundaries that you want us to upload, maybe soil data, any quality data, you can also send that to support the FarmQA, and we will get that uploaded as part of that demo to better assess our product. Okay, everybody, well, I really appreciate the time, and we'll be in touch.